Ghost caught on camera in abandoned hospital. The camera flickered on with a faint buzz, its red light glowing like a heartbeat in the suffocating silence. The screen showed nothing more than peeling paint, collapsed ceiling tiles, and a long corridor bathed in shadow. Yet something about that place made every hair on the back of the neck rise. This wasn't just an ordinary building, and those who dared to step inside knew they were gambling with something far greater than fear. The old hospital on the edge of town had been abandoned for 30 years, a place where whispers of suffering still echoed through rusted pipes and broken windows. Local legends claimed that patients had died under cruel experiments in its basement, and the stories said their spirits still lingered, restless, screaming for justice that never came. That was exactly why 4 friends, Daniel, Aisha, Mark, and Sophia, decided to go inside. Not out of courage, but out of a dangerous mix of curiosity and desperation. They were young documentary creators, struggling to find their big break. Each of them carried their own silent battles. Daniel was the leader, but deep down, he was carrying guilt from losing his younger brother in a car accident years ago. Aisha was brave on the outside but haunted by panic attacks that she never let anyone see. Mark was chasing recognition because his family never believed in him, while Sophia, the quiet one, carried the weight of trying to support her ill mother, praying every project might be the one that paid for treatment. The abandoned hospital was their chance, or at least they believed it was, the kind of viral story that could change everything. The night they arrived, fog rolled over the cracked pavement like a living thing. The hospital loomed ahead, its windows shattered, its front doors hanging open as if the building itself was inviting them in. The air smelled of rust, mold, and something older, something rotten. They set up their cameras, flashlights cutting across the darkness, while Daniel spoke to the lens with a rehearsed confidence. Tonight, we're investigating St. Mary's Hospital, closed since 1991. Locals say it's haunted. They say shadows move when no one's there. They say screams echo at night. Tonight, we'll find out for ourselves. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. They walked deeper inside, their footsteps crunching against broken glass. Every hallway stretched longer than it should have, and the silence was thick enough to choke. The camera caught graffiti scrawled across the walls, messages like "Don't go down there" and "She never left." Mark laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood, but even he fell silent when they reached the surgical wing. The smell hit them first, decay, faint but undeniable, though no one had set foot there in decades. Sophia whispered, "Do you feel that? Like the air is heavier here?" Her voice cracked. She wasn't wrong. The hallway seemed to press against their lungs, and every shadow looked like it could step forward at any moment. They set up a static camera in the hallway, leaving it to record while they explored further. Hours passed in tense silence broken only by dripping water and the occasional squeak of a rat. They found old wheelchairs rusted in place, surgical tables stained with things they dared not name, and rooms where the walls were clawed as if someone had tried to escape. Still, nothing happened, until midnight struck. At first, it was faint. A sound so soft it could be mistaken for imagination. A child's laugh, echoing from the far end of the hall. Daniel froze. Sophia's flashlight shook in her hand. "Tell me you all heard that," Aisha whispered. They ran back to the static camera, and their blood ran cold. On the small screen, in the exact same hallway where no one had been, a shadow moved. Not a trick of the light, not dust, an unmistakable figure of a woman in a hospital gown, drifting silently across the hall. Daniel wanted to keep going. "This is it. This is the proof we came for," he said, though his voice betrayed more fear than triumph. Aisha wanted to leave, but Mark argued, "If we stop now, no one will believe it's real. We have to go deeper." Against their better judgment, they followed the shadow. It led them to the basement stairwell, each step groaning under their weight as if warning them to turn back. The air grew colder, their breath visible in the dim beam of their flashlights. At the bottom, they found what no one had spoken of, the old psychiatric ward, sealed off for decades. The doors were chained, but one had been broken open. They stepped inside. The ward was worse than anything they had seen above. The walls were covered in scratch marks. Rusted beds with leather restraints lined the rooms, and the smell of dampness mixed with something metallic, like old blood. Sophia felt her chest tighten, tears burning her eyes as if the pain of the past patients had seeped into her bones. Aisha clutched her camera, whispering prayers under her breath. That was when the lights from their flashlights flickered, one by one, until the hallway plunged into darkness. Then came the screams, not from them, but from everywhere at once. Men, women, children, crying, begging, howling. The sound was unbearable. Mark dropped his equipment, covering his ears, shouting that he couldn't take it. Daniel tried to grab him, but Mark stumbled into one of the rooms. They ran after him, and that's when they saw her. The woman from the camera. She stood at the far end of the room, her face hidden by tangled hair, her body swaying slightly. Her voice was a whisper that carried across the room, "You shouldn't be here." The cameras caught everything, but at that moment, the four of them forgot the documentary. Fear gripped them like chains. The woman lifted her head, and where her eyes should have been were only hollow shadows. The temperature dropped so low they could see frost forming on the walls. Sophia collapsed, sobbing, while Aisha dragged her up. Daniel forced himself to step forward, his brother's face flashing in his mind. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice breaking. The woman screamed, and the sound wasn't human. It was the sound of every pain that had ever existed in that place, layered into one unbearable cry. The lights shattered, and the group ran. They didn't stop until they reached the surface, stumbling out into the foggy night, gasping for air like survivors of a fire. But when they reviewed the footage, their fear only deepened. Not only had the camera caught the figure of the woman, but it had captured dozens more, faces pressed against the walls, shadows following their every step, hands reaching out from the darkness. The video went viral within days. Millions watched in disbelief, arguing whether it was real or staged. For Daniel, Aisha, Mark, and Sophia, the fame didn't matter. What haunted them wasn't the attention, it was the memory. Each of them changed after that night. Mark stopped joking, often waking from nightmares drenched in sweat. Sophia struggled with the visions of hollow eyes every time she closed her own. Aisha, who had spent years hiding her anxiety, found herself crippled by it in daylight. Daniel carried the worst of it, the feeling that the spirits were still following him, waiting for something he didn't understand. Yet in the darkest moments, something shifted. They began speaking with survivors of real tragedies, people who had lived through pain and loss. They realized the abandoned hospital was more than a building of ghosts, it was a symbol of voices silenced and forgotten. Instead of chasing fame, they used their platform to tell stories that mattered, to give voice to those who had been ignored, abused, or erased by time. Their encounter with the paranormal became the spark that pushed them to face their own fears, their own grief, and to transform it into something meaningful. The hospital still stands, broken and empty, but those who pass by swear they see lights flicker in the windows at night. Some say the ghosts are still trapped, but Daniel believes differently now. He believes they are not trapped, they are remembered, and in remembrance, there is peace. So the next time you hear of a ghost caught on camera, ask yourself, is it just fear? Or is it a reminder that every soul, no matter how lost, longs to be heard, to be remembered, and to matter? And maybe the real haunting is not the spirits we fear, but the silence we leave behind when we forget the stories of those who came before us. In the weeks after their escape from the abandoned hospital, life felt both louder and quieter at the same time. Louder, because the world was suddenly paying attention. News outlets replayed their footage. Paranormal experts debated its authenticity, while skeptics dissected every frame. Quiet, because in their private lives, none of them spoke much. Each friend carried silence like a shadow, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but heavy with things too difficult to say. Daniel stopped sleeping through the night. He would wake up drenched in sweat, convinced he heard faint footsteps in his apartment. Sometimes, he swore he could see his brother's reflection in mirrors, reminding him of the guilt he never truly let go. Aisha became withdrawn, her panic attacks returning in waves so strong she sometimes couldn't leave her room. Mark, once the loudest of the group, grew solemn, replaying the sound of those screams in his head, questioning why he ever pushed them deeper into the hospital. Sophia became fragile, more than ever, as if the encounter had cracked something inside her that had been barely holding on. Yet slowly, the darkness that followed them began to reveal something unexpected. One day, Daniel received an email from a woman who had lost her child in the same hospital decades ago. She thanked him for showing the footage, saying it felt like the first time her daughter's story hadn't been forgotten. That message struck Daniel harder than any fear ever could. For the first time since his brother's death, he realized the weight of memory, the power of remembering those who could no longer speak for themselves. Aisha began to talk more openly about her panic attacks. What once was her greatest shame turned into her strength, because viewers who struggled with the same battles began writing to her, saying her honesty gave them courage. Mark started filming not for fame, but to highlight the forgotten, the homeless man who lived under the bridge, the widow who lost everything, the refugee child who still managed to smile. Sophia, despite her fragility, began to write letters to hospitals and organizations, advocating for mental health support, knowing too well the silence of the abandoned ward they had stood in. Together, they transformed their channel from a ghost-hunting spectacle into something far greater, a place where lost voices were heard, where untold stories found light. The abandoned hospital had terrified them, broken them, and scarred them, but it had also given them the gift, the understanding that every soul, whether living or gone, deserves to be remembered. And though the footage of the ghost remained the most viewed video of their lives, it was no longer the center of their story. The center became their resilience. The center became their choice to turn fear into purpose. The center became the reminder that even in the darkest places, light can be found when we listen, when we remember, and when we choose not to walk away from pain but to carry it forward as a lesson. Years later, when people asked Daniel if the ghost was real, he would pause, smile sadly, and say, "We saw something that night, yes. But what matters more than what we saw is what it made us do." The real haunting isn't the spirits trapped in that hospital. The real haunting is forgetting the people who suffered there. That's why we tell their stories, so they are never lost again. The old hospital still stands in silence. The wind howls through its broken windows. Locals still whisper about lights flickering in the dead of night. But for Daniel, Aisha, Mark, and Sophia, those lights aren't warnings anymore. They are reminders. Reminders that even in forgotten ruins, voices can rise again, and even from the shadows, hope can be born. And so the story of the ghost caught on camera is not just about fear. It is about courage, about memory, about the strength to face what terrifies us and transform it into something that heals. Because in the end, the scariest thing isn't the ghost that follows you. It's the silence that comes when you stop remembering. And as long as they lived, none of them ever stopped remembering. The ghost caught on camera wasn't just proof of the supernatural. It was a reminder that every soul, living or gone, deserves to be remembered. Fear may follow us, but what truly haunts us is silence, the silence of forgotten stories, the silence of voices never heard. In the end, courage is not about chasing shadows, but about turning fear into purpose, pain into strength, and memory into light. And as long as we keep remembering, no one is ever truly lost.